I need your full name, please. I can say
Okay,
it.
full name is Ronald, middle initial G, and the last name is Parsons, Parsons.
All right.
Can I get you a drink, Ronald? So you sure?
I'm for sure.
That's all I need for now.
Service number is US 52 39 75 98. How's that?
That's pretty good.
It's something you never forget when you go into service. Well, I'm a different kind of veteran. I was in peacetime.
Okay.
I did serve for roughly 16 months in France. I volunteered for the draft and went into service 10 May 56 and took basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Had a good time, great time. And a little background, I was a farm boy. I was well muscled. Yeah, I did a little running before I went into service, sort of get my wind up.
Is that in school?
Yeah, well, for the, no, just for the Army.
Oh,
We
okay. I
we
see.
lived back
Raised
on
before.
quite a lane. And like I said, I was a farm boy, and I'd run out to the end of the lane and back a couple times a night after it got dark. And sort of got my physical condition up, and when I went in service, I had a ball. A lot of people talk about basic training being tough. Basic training is what you make of it. You go in and you do what you're told, and you do all your exercising, everything. Yeah, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to be sore. I was not sore. I was in good shape.
You think being
So-
from the farm
Yeah,
kind of
I had a
affected all
ball.
that?
Uh,
With discipline and having to be physical?
Yeah. My mother was a school teacher. My dad was a farmer. And I had 4 older brothers. I was baby of the family. 5 boys, no girls in the family, and all 5 of us served in the Army.
Wow.
I was the only one that went overseas. Being a draftee, going overseas, and the youngest in the family, I'm sort of a different kind of a Army cat, veteran. I had a good time. I took basic, like I said, at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and then my advanced training was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, clerk typist school, believe it or not. I drove the guard truck and the supply truck for a company about half the time, so I got a half an education in clerk typing, but enough to get by for the job that I ended up doing. I went overseas in, I don't remember what it was. Well, yes, I do. That's about October 1st of 56. Ended up in Orleans, France,
Oh, wow.
about 60 miles southwest of Paris. I was at a supply control agency in the quartermaster, and we handled the repair parts for quartermaster equipment, and we kept inventory records.
What's quartermaster equipment?
Quartermaster does a little bit of everything, from office furniture to the repair parts for everything that the quartermaster
Oh,
operates.
okay. I see.
In the mess halls, the stoves, all that stuff. Quartermaster also did requisition of food on the economy over there, the local economy. And it was unbelievable. We got milk out of Holland, and we didn't buy French milk for some reason. I don't know why. But it was politics and everything else.
Okay.
So,
As far as supply order,
yeah,
or
but
yeah,
we
chains.
handled the repair parts for the laundry equipment for the laundries throughout Europe, and some of the Air Force laundries were not under our command or under the Army command, but our repair parts fit their equipment. So we did some inter-service equipment. And it was during this time that I was seeing from the inventory changes that, hey, something is going on, because we were shipping stuff from depots out of Europe to Asia. And of course, this was 6-7 years before the Jungle War started. And so my master sergeant, he'd been in Korea, and he says, do you notice an inventory going out of our command? And I says, yes, I see that. And he said, well, stick your nose in there, find out what's going on. I says, I can't do that. So I ended up with a file cabinet full of IBM cards that had been key punched.
Oh, wow.
And one night, I took the little stack of cards and went into the machine room or computer room and stuck them in a card reader and had a catalog printed out. I said, okay, that's good enough for me. So I told the sergeant, and he says, where'd you find this out at? And I says, I don't know.
A little bird told
And
me.
then about 3 days later, the Department of Army civilian left some papers lay on his desk, confidential, secret, and top secret. And I thought, uh-oh. So I picked those up as a security breach and gave them to the commanding officer. And of course, it came out that, yeah, we're shipping stuff to Asia. That was about all he said. And so we put two and two together after I got out of service, and I thought, yeah, I was shipping equipment to the Philippines and Nam, and also to Taiwan and Japan and Korea out of our depots for their use over there. So that's how I learned about where Vietnam was. But I spent roughly 16 months in France, and yeah, I was a 19-year-old farm kid, and I grew up in France. That's about the only way I can put it. I did travel to London, England, went to Amsterdam, Holland, and had a good time both places. Yeah, there were some funny things that the GIs got in trouble with, and it was nice just to sit there and listen to what somebody did and think, man, I was 6 foot from this guy. And yeah, we drank a little beer, threw a little beer, threw a few beer balls here and there. But overall, I had a good time when I was in service overseas, and then in fall 57, I said, I've been here long enough, I'm ready to go home, and I didn't want to wait until the following April. So I put in for an early release to go back and work on the farm, and I got it. So I left over there in January of 58 and stayed about a month up in Fort Chardon, Illinois, Chicago, and that's where I was discharged from. And then I had reserves up until 62, but I started working nights at Western Electric in Columbus, Ohio, so I got out of the reserves and I was just on standby, and I served 2 weeks in reserves giving other guys discharges that had been over in Korea, you know, in the Army, get their paperwork caught up for them. And that was really what my military service was about. I arrived in France on October 3rd, 56, and the Russians went into Hungary during the Hungarian Revolution. So I always tell people I was in the Hungarian Revolution, because here's a green-clad recruit just arrived in the theater, and guess what? You're in combat gear, you're given 10 shells for a carbine, and you're sent out to guard the rear post or rear gate of this army post you're stationed at. You know, what the hell's going on? Yeah. But yeah, we were on alert for 3 days, and yeah, I learned a lot about the military in 3 days, because we had sergeants from World War II, we had captains that came through World War II or Korea. We had master sergeants that came in from Korea, you know, that did, you know, paperwork, command work, things like this. And they more or less let that military training that they had in their theaters of service filter down to us draftees in the compound. The offices where I worked were located in Maison-Fort, France, where the 537th Combat Engineers had their base. And we had a lot of foreigners in that construction battalion, so you learned a lot, what they went through and where they lived, and from Puerto Rico to the Bronx. We had guys from Cuba, believe it or not, that immigrated over to the country, and they went in the service to learn a trade, and they ended up in combat engineers. And we had, well, originally our office was there, and we moved the office a couple times on base, but also the barracks was there. And a lot of the fellows that I served with had been there for 6 or 8 months, and they lived in tar paper shacks. They were heated with a coal stove in the middle of their tent or their shack, and most of the office people from the Supply Control Center, myself included, we lived in what was called Harvard Barracks. And Harvard Barracks was built to be a rear area hospital. So yes, we had very nice living quarters. It kept it very clean, and that contributed to an enjoyable experience rather than living in a tar paper shack. But yeah, we pulled KP, did all this, and really the Army was adjusting, is the word they used, their rear area to better suit the troops and improve morale. It's what they were looking to do. And so every once in a while we'd get an inspection from somebody from Germany, and we had to really polish it up and shine and show we were taking good care of their money. But they built a new EM club. It was under construction when I left there in January of '58. Since then, they have built, I think it's a 4-floor gymnasium. In other words, it's all one floor, but they had 4 basketball courts in it. And the bowling alley was built. I bowled, I think, twice in it before I left. They had, I'm trying to think, the theater, that was built while I was there. Yeah, we packed it every night because it was something to do. And I and also, we'd go to the library and we'd check out technical books, and it was always, hey, read this, hey, read this. And I learned a lot. And while I was there, I traveled a little bit, carried a pouch on my arm, locked on my arm, with a 45 on my hip, rode a train from Orleans to Paris, subway over to the North Station, got on another train. We'd go either up to Metz in France. I went to Verdun a couple times. That's where the big battles were fought. And most generally, I went to Frankfurt, Germany. I met an MP and another guy up there, and we exchanged pouches in the train station. And I was, caught the same train, probably rode the same train, all the way back to Paris North Station. And never asked any questions. What's the pouch? I had clearance, but never asked any questions. And we had a couple guys that they traveled together, escorting prisoners, and taking a pouch. Some carried a big pouch. I always carried a little small one. And they had some run-ins, and we always thought that the communists wouldn't know what the hell was going on. There was a lot of spying going on. But my most memorable trip, I went to Paris for a weekend with a 3-day pass. I had done something extraordinary, and so they gave me a pass. And I'm on my way back on Monday evening, and we had a lieutenant in our organization who was pot-bellied. Thought his silver bars were giving him the freedom to do about what he wanted. And I just pulled out the 45 and I says, hey, you ask questions, you're going off the train. And he went down to another compartment. And I got wrote up for that, and everybody laughed about it. And then they tore it up and didn't file it. So I was happy. I worked with a major who was a good old boy. And he had been to, well, I think parts of China he was in, and I know he was in Japan. but he served like 3 tours, I believe, in Europe, various locations. So he was just a laid-back, good old boy. He was getting ready to retire with, I think, 30 years service or something like that. And he gave me a oak leaf major insignia, and I still got it as a souvenir for doing things for him, special things. And you did favors, you got favors. And that was peacetime. And like I say, I'm a different kind of a veteran. I came home and I didn't get any parade. I got a ball of beer, my mom about crapped. then she relinquished. I could put a 6-pack in the refrigerator. You know, it was balls, but my dad liked that. And so did my brother. But yeah, I sort of introduced him to a little bit of drinking. None of my brothers smoked, but I came back as a smoker. And you know, that was a bad habit I brought back with me. But sometimes the atmosphere and the tension and what we did and what was going on, you wanted something, the other guys were having a cigarette, give me a cigarette, and you smoked.
Did they transport you guys mostly on trains and ships back
Well,
then?
when I got out of basic in Missouri, my first airplane ride was back to Columbus, Ohio. It was TWA, twin engine plane, and I was on the milk run. St. Louis to someplace in Illinois to Indianapolis. In other words, the plane went up and down and up and down, and we were landing here and there. And you know, for a greenhorn kid from the farm and never been up in the air, what the hell am I doing up here? You know, and then I flew out of Louisville to Philadelphia, and we took a bus over to Fort Dix. And I had just made my bunk for the night, and they came in and said they had room for 3 guys. And I said, I'll go. And I took off, because I was not getting woke up to do KP in the morning, you know. So they took my bus from Fort Dix over to McGuire Air Base, and the plane was grounded, so hey, give me Air Force blankets, all that stuff, and I went in and made another bunk. Ended up, another plane was leaving. They had a bunch of fallout, a bunch of dependents weren't going, and they wanted volunteers. I told the guy next to me, I says, tear my bunk up, I'm going. So I really ended up going from Fort Knox to McGuire, and was on my way to Europe the same day, or same night. But we flew from McGuire to Newfoundland. This is October, and they had snow up there on Newfoundland. I mean, you look out the window and there was 4 foot of snow on both sides of the runway. And then I flew from there to Prestwick, Scotland. And they used 2 Jeeps to run the ducks off the runway. It was a nice trip, but Scotland was a beautiful country. It was. Emerald green pastures and everything. And beautiful country. And then we flew to Frankfurt, Germany. And I still remember coming in over the pine trees in Germany and getting down the runway, and all you could see was pines on both sides. You know, maybe there was a half mile on each side. Of course, you had barracks and everything else. But Frankfurt Rhine Air Base was there, and that's where we flew to. And of course, from there I went downtown Frankfurt to the replacement center, and we were there 2 nights. And of course, some of the guys took off, and they didn't realize that German beer was strong. And two beers, and you had to drag the guy home. But I stayed on base. Primarily, I wanted to get the H out of there. I wanted to get on to wherever I was going. But they came down with a bus one night and says, you're going to France. And I said, okay. So they put me on a train, and we had guys on the train. But again, we were on like a milk run. I think it stopped at every town between Frankfurt and Paris. And these guys would buy balls of wine from these people along the train tracks. Every station they stopped in, you know, they'd get a ball of wine. You talk about a bunch of ragtag, bunch of people. They got into Paris. I mean, they were a mess. And I'm thinking to myself, get the hell away from them. So I had my ticket, and they told me where I was going, and I said, okay. I thought I knew enough French. I ended up going circle around Paris in a circle until I figured out, hey, I missed my station.
Oh, no.
But I got off at the South Station. I got on the train and ended up in Orleans by like 6 a.m. in the morning. And the MPs picked me up at the station, took me back to the MP barracks. They brought in a tray of food for me from the mess hall. And they said, yeah, what's your orders? And I said, 7962. And he looked at me and he says, you don't want to go out there this morning. I'll take you out at noon. They were doing some training there, so I missed training on the Saturday morning I got there. Courtesy of the MP. But I had a good time. I really did. I enjoyed it. I think growing up in the small community I did, it's a farming community, I learned to keep my wits about me. My graduating class had 11 in it in high school, small school. I think my background, I was born in West Virginia, went to a one-room schoolhouse with the coal stove sitting in the middle of the school building. And then I went to France, and here I'm in a shack with a coal stove sitting in the middle of it.
Small world.
Small world. But fortunately, I only had to be in the shack, I don't know where it's 1 or 2 nights. And I never bothered to unpack because they told me don't unpack because we're moving to the barracks tomorrow. And I said, fine. And they said, well, how come you're not up to barracks now? So that was the second morning, and they came down and got me in a Jeep and took me up there. So I never went to work for a week. And my first day of the week, basically I did what I'm doing right here, is I interviewed with the colonel that was in charge, and then his adjutant, I talked to him, and his first sergeant, talked to him. Then went out to the section and talked to the master sergeants out there, and gradually worked my way down. So, hey, you got a desk, this is your desk, that's your typewriter. And didn't really do too much. I was in charge of supply catalogs that came out of the IBM room or machine room. They were about this thick, they come out in loose paper, and I had to thread them with a long needle and sew them together according to the series and the commodity codes that they pertain to. And then the Department of Army civilians, they used those, as well as the supply control technicians that had little tables full of IBM cards that they would transfer information over to their cards. And then I was in charge of what they call a confidential price list and an unlocked file cabinet. And then they got me a security clearance, and I worked on some of the security cards, pricing cards for supplies. And I knew where every complete laundry was in Europe. I knew exactly what, the day it was built, and the models and everything else, right down to the horsepower on the pumps. I could look at those cards and read it off. That's what I did. But really, there was no, I guess the airplane flights to and from Europe, I came back on a MATS flight. That was military air transport, ran by the Air Force, and it was a plane, I think, a little more luxury because the civilians came back on it, the officers came back on it. And there's, I think, 5 or 6 of us enlisted guys or Army guys. We took the tail of the plane, and we could smoke back there because it was smoking right out the plane. But
Don't try that today.
no. But that was a good flight. We had some of the Army brats would come back to our section of the plane, and we'd tease them, play with them, get out in the middle of the aisle and roll marbles at them. The marble would go all the way up the front of the plane. Then we take off, we hear clink, 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 and there's these marbles coming back. But the real experience flying home was landing in the Azores, which is governed by Portugal. And we were under armed guard. We had to ride this whole, I'm going to say a 4850 Ford school bus up over this hill and down the other side. That's where the mess hall was. And it was the Portuguese Army mess hall. And they served food to the United States military come flying through the, for refueling. And we were under armed guard, and they'd line us up and count us, then march in by rank. In other words, the officers and their wives and their kids, they got fed first, the whole bit. Here we are, enlisted men. We were at the end of the line. And we joked with the Portuguese guys, and they enjoyed it. Because one of them spoke English, and we told us where we were from, and all that, where we'd been, what we'd done. Everything was wide open. And they enjoyed it. And we got on the plane, we had a box waiting on us. Cake. We had this big cake. Oh, it's probably that big around. This surplus to them, their mess hall, and so they gave it to the enlisted men. Those other characters didn't get cake. So, paid to be nice.
Lucky you, huh? It's better to be lucky than good
well,
sometimes.
Lucky, it's flying by the seat of your pants or your wits end. That's what you have to do. And I came back, I landed at McGuire.
Take your time.
Hello.
He wasn't joking.
We're still rolling.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, about civilian use here. High technology of the 2000, whatever. Landed at McGuire, and my dad, I knew, came in, ate dinner, then went out and got the eggs from the chickens. And he came back in, had a cup of coffee, and usually read the paper. And I caught him about 2 minutes before he went back out for good for the afternoon. And he picked up the phone and he says, hello? And I says, hey, I'm in New Jersey. He said, you are? He says, well, take care of yourself. I got to go.
Welcome home.
He didn't give a damn whether I came home or not. It was my impression of it. But I went to Fort Sheridan, no experience, wild experiences out there, behaved myself. We did go to Milwaukee to the rooftop. That's a dance floor on top of a hotel in Milwaukee. And we had a good time. And, most of the guys were from overseas. And we sat around and we chatted and made fools of ourselves and drank a little too much beer.
Seems to be a common theme with the R&R.
Well, yeah, we had a good time. And basically, like I say, I went in as civilian, went in peacetime. I came out in peacetime. I didn't serve any combat areas. I saw areas that the war had destroyed, and I have pictures of the twin church towers in Orleans where the Allies bombed in Orleans when the Germans had it. And these towers are like 30 foot out of sync, and they never repaired them. They left them as a symbol of the Allies coming through there and beating the hell out of the Germans. And these towers are leaning like this probably today, as far as I know. But that was something that all the GIs went to see. And, they had a huge cathedral there in Orleans, and a lot of times I went with the guys when we went to Mass, and I toured, some other places. I can't remember all the names. Went to a lot of the chateaus. Louis the 16th, I believe it was, the descendants of his foxhounds were still there on the chateau. And that was interesting, you know. And
Those are basically the French mansions, right?
yeah, French mansions.
Okay.
Went up to Chartres, saw the cathedral up there. Let's see, I went down to Poitiers a couple times. And let's see. Went to Poitiers, the coast. I won't tell you anymore. I went to the Mediterranean coast. That was it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for
Yep,
doing this for us.
That's okay. I did not experience what some of these guys have experienced. And I should be happy about it, but I'm glad they served. And I was proud to serve. I saw the things that, the countryside went through in the war.
Sure.
Because Patton came right up through Loire Valley in France, and he didn't stop. I mean, he overran them and says, give up or be shot. And that motto still painted on a few of those buildings over there, fences especially. And I seen a couple fences that the tanks went through. Of course, the fences are, 6 foot high and they're 2 foot thick of stone. And they're moored together, and you take a tank and you just hit it, and it goes right on through. You're just up and over and down in it. And that's what Patton did. I mean, he advanced in France, unbelievable.
Blood and guts, right?
Yep, blood and guts. But we had one sergeant that he had fought up through France, but he came up the other side about 10 miles away. But he ended up being in Verdun when they had the real hard battles up there. And he says, come across the countryside was nothing. When the Germans stopped, you stopped. And he says, we had a hell of a battle. And he lost a lot of good buddies. A lot of them died in prison camps. Just malnutrition, disease, whatever, And, you hear war stories, you hear them tell you where they've been, what they did. And you realize, hey, you're lucky to be a draftee. And you're lucky that you didn't have to go to non. So really what I did, I ended up in that little peacetime slot between the end of Korea until it settled down about 54, 55. The peace, I think the armistice was signed in 53, but there was still some friction going on, and before dawn. And I was lucky I got out of the reserves when I came up before NOMS really started heating up. And so, I can tell you, I'm a little different type of veteran, but I'm glad of what these guys did because I learned a lot from them. And it's just, it was a blessing.
What did you end up doing after for a career, or did that inform what you ended up doing with
Well, I ended
later?
up, my dad had me a job lined up working part-time at a filling station for $1 an hour. Big wage. And I more than quit more than once because I did not like the money I was making. I thought I was worth more money.
Sure.
And then I went back to school at Ohio State, and I did not want to do that. Primarily, I went back, get off the farm. Then I worked for Western Electric in Columbus. And I did a couple other things and got into the insurance industry. And I was an underwriter. I came to Cincinnati, worked for an insurance company.
Okay.
And I don't know what else to tell you. You got more questions, surely.
So you saw plenty of rebuilding going on when you were in France. There were still
Yes.
evidence 10 or 12 years later of...
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
There were still houses that had bombed out, barns that was, fire that destroyed the barn. And, I played some softball at this one place, and there was a barn close by. And they said, go and look inside that barn. And I did, and there were bones of animals in that barn. They had been there for 15 years, And, and they still would dig up shells and things like this. We had a ordnance outfit that did a lot of digging up shells and setting them off and things, wild things with them.
Did you get an impression of what the civilians kind of thought of your presence there?
As a whole, I think the French people did welcome the armed forces there. There's always an element in any society that will be resistive, and it was a little larger, I would say, in France because of the communist influence, and also the Algerian War was going on, and France was involved in that. It was
In North Africa.
yeah, in North Africa. And it was a political situation. They had a lot of refugees. I had a real good friend. She came up from Morocco, and I met her in Paris, and we went to this and that, and museums, and this bar and that bar, and you know, the whole bit. And it was a delightful time. It's like, you know, you got our own personal tour guide.
Right.
And she would say, "Oh, we'll just hop on the, what do you call that darn thing? Metro." That's what they call it, the sewer, I mean, the subway. They call it the Metro, you know. And we'd hop on that, go 5 miles and hop off. She says, "I know there's a place up here good to eat." We'd go up there to eat, and then we'd go to this church and walk through it, and go through the museum and walk through it, and things like this. It was great. It was wonderful. I had a great time. But,
So it's safe to say you saw a lot of places that you would have seen otherwise if it wasn't for your service.
that's right. Absolutely. In Orleans, I would take off after Saturday training, and I was sort of a loner, so to speak. But I'd see somebody that maybe I was in basic training with, or was on the plane with, and we'd pair up and we'd go here, there, or place else, and we knew what our boundaries were, you know, what was off limits, and there were off limits areas. And we'd follow our map and do what we wanted to do. Then we'd go back and have a jambone sandwich and a beer or wine and vino.
Making me thirsty.
Well, the jambone sandwich was a ham sandwich on the French bread with 2 slabs of butter. Man, it was good. Oh man, it was good.
Have you been back to France since?
No. I wouldn't mind going back, but I think if I did decide I wanted to go back, I'd have to learn the French language. Because let's face it, I'm 80 years old, and probably 95, 99% of the people I knew are no longer there. They're deceased, you know.
Did
yeah.
you keep up with any of the people you keep up with or serving with at the time? Or
Fellow I went into basic training, he lives up close to where I grew up in Ohio. As far as I know, he's still living. I've talked to him maybe every 5 or 6 years, something like this. All the fellows I went into service with, with the exception of 2 of us, are deceased.
wow.
And then another fellow, he worked for GM in New Jersey. Found him on the internet, and he's retired. I haven't heard from him for ages, and I'm thinking, well, he's probably deceased too. But he and I got into a back and forth conversation about what we knew about who died and who not. And he says, you know, I think probably 95% of the guys we served with are deceased. And I wrote back and I said, it could be higher. And I wouldn't doubt it is higher. Because I was only 19 when I got overseas, and most of the fellows were 23, 24, years old. They'd gone through 4 years of college, and once they lost their student deferment, they got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So they were in school at 23, 24 years old. And it's the same thing in basic training. These guys were so far out of shape. I mean, make you sick at their struggles.
Mm.
But most of those fellows have passed on. And you have your individuals like Bob here and the other, or Ed, the other fellow, and some of the ladies that are here in the compound. They've been, in service, and they are survivors. They're in their 90s, and there's very few of those guys left. And I think what you're doing is a wonderful project. And like what we were talking about, I think last time you were here, the time before that, that some of these records centers
Mhm.
have not kept the records as they should have.
Yeah.
Researchers have torn the hell out of them. You know, they're getting dog-eared. The one caught on fire, I think the one down in Alabama caught on fire. Not
I've
too
heard
long.
about that.
Yeah.
St. Louis.
St. Louis,
Or,
yeah.
Ripped through a lot
or
of records.
Kansas
St.
City, one of the
Louis.
two.
They lost 8 million records or
It's
something like
a
that.
huge chunk of the alphabet
Yeah.
are gone
And,
forever. So what they do now too is they try to recreate them. If you submit a request and they don't have anything, they will ask you, well, we don't have anything. What do you have? We need to recreate the files.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of that. I've been contacted a couple of times by, military researchers
Mhm.
wanting to know, did you know this guy at, Orleans, France,
Mhm.
or Quartermaster Corps, or did you know this guy at Fort Knox? And they go through and they picked up a lot of the registers, or a lot of the list of the people that served here, there, and everywhere. Like you go down to Fort Knox, you'll find probably 15, 20 million names of people that went through Fort Knox for training.
'Cause there was a big tank corps down there, right?
Oh yeah, they trained for tanks down there, and that's all going to someplace in Alabama, I believe. But they had the military correspondence schools, other things there. We had the Army mechanics were there. So I think she wants us to wrap this up.
No, sorry, I have to go see the executive director for a meeting
In here?
downstairs,
Okay.
so I was just kind of saying,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
We
Thank
shouldn't be
you.
as much longer.
No, it's however long you guys
Well,
want to take, thank you so much.
you guys got
Thank you
some
very
questions, fire them away, and I'll help set up, reset whatever she had.
I think you've covered a whole lot of things that we could even ask you about, to be honest with you.
Well,
Is there, do you feel like what you did made an impact on what your decisions were, or how your life turned out, or how you turned out, or?
well, I think, like I said at the beginning, I grew up overseas, and I think I made a lot of good decisions. Probably, sometimes it's probably about 100%. I made, I think, one or two bad decisions while I was over there. One, I didn't get caught, and two, everybody laughed about it and says, "You asshole."
Care to share?
No,
Had to ask.
but it involved that lieutenant.
So is your opinion of the Army and the armed forces changed since
No.
you've been in?
I don't think my opinion has changed. I think the armed forces has changed because society as a whole has changed. You have kids out on the street today that could not survive basic training, in all honesty. These kids don't know what is what, and they don't know what the military has done for this country to make our level of living what it is today. The military trained a lot of our fathers, not my father, but other people's fathers, and people I associated with. They come out of the military with a purpose in life. Now, I didn't have the benefit of the GI Bill when I came out, and I had to pay my own tuition. And when you're short, you don't go to school. And I think that a lot of the kids today, if they had the draft, they would find any kind of reason they could avoid it, because they're not that military oriented like our youngsters were when I was, 18, 19, 20 years old. I had to say to one son, I says, "Did you go down and register to selective service?" He says, "What's that?" He didn't know what it was. And that's terrible. course, we played the prank on one of my daughters. She told her she had to go down and register. That was funny. But, yeah, out of my graduating class, there was 4 guys in my class. I volunteered for a draft. Another guy, he got drafted. He was married, and I don't think he had any children at the time, but he had a hard way to go.
Mm.
And I know another boy that was in the junior class behind me. He went in the Air Force, and he lasted a day and a half. They sent him home.
Wow.
He just didn't have it. He could not take Air Force discipline, and I mean, that was just fresh discipline, first day he was in. He smoked like a fiend when he was in high school, and he couldn't go 2 hours without having a cigarette. He broke ranks and go get a cigarette. They got rid of him. These are things that went on. I mean, I'm sort of saying, okay, I graduated in 1955, went to service 1956, and I think between 56 and 58 was sort of the breaking point between the Korean and World War II veterans and the lessons they brought home and the atmosphere they brought home and spilled over into civilian life. And because kids didn't really start to resist going to service until, 59, 60, 61, something like this. So it just sort of matured itself where you got the war protest, when NOM started. A lot of kids would join that and get a little blemish on their record, and the Army didn't want them. Nobody wanted them. So it made a big difference. And some of those kids, the best thing for them to do would be go into service, learn a trade, learn some electronics, things like this, and come back out and you're set for life. They didn't do it. And I don't think the kids today would do it. Guys who go into the service, they probably learn as much about electronics and computerization than if they're, in civilian life. Because the Army is more computerized, and the people gotta have computerized equipment. You gotta have that knowledge. But you still gotta have somebody that's got their finger on the trigger. So, what other questions you want to ask me? I behaved myself.
I think you've covered quite a lot of ground, really. Do you have any other things,
So
Mike,
I
you can think
have
of?
done a great job.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
For peacetime veteran, like I told you, you heard the servicemen speak. Well, peacetime veterans have their own stories to tell.
Absolutely. That's what they're
Uh,
all important to save, yes.
Yeah, they had experiences that the wartime veterans didn't get to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I went to London, I walked right through the Queen's Guards, their barracks. That's where the horses were, that's where the carriages were, that was their barracks over there, this is where their training ground, and I walked out the back gate. And I mean, it's wide open. Tourists did that. Yeah, I saw Buckingham Palace, I saw Queen Victoria's statue in the circle out in front. I see it on TV. I was there,
Mm-hmm.
It's enjoyable. I was, I can't pronounce it,
Trafalgar?
Trafalgar Square
Yeah.
with all the pigeons. I have a slide where I'm holding this pigeon on my hand like this. This little baby, he was petting the pigeon, okay? And his mother was taking the picture. Try that today. You can't do it.
Mm.
I don't mess with pigeons.
Well, hey,
They're rats with wings.
yeah, that's right. But there's probably 50,000 pigeons on that square.
You can go blind if they go in your eye. Did you know that? Hopefully it doesn't happen to you.
Sure. If a pigeon's flying overhead, you're stupid to open your eyes,
That's a good point.
or even to look up. It's like a flock of starlings.
I think she's got a closing statement to read, and then we'll be out of your hair.
All righty,
All right, let's wrap this up.
fire off.
Okay, let me get my...
Oh, I did bring my D-214 That's my discharge from the Army.